to go out and we need to work at that level and build those and structure those with mana whenua at the sort of Rohi and Hapu and Marae level. That's what we want to focus on. And it is about this gentle approach as we go through into this.
Yeah, because one of the reasons I ask about that is because D1 also includes Hapu, which then translates further out to Marae and Whānau. So my next question is regarding Y2358 and the finding that Māori who still had in possession streams and freshwater bodies in some way either possessed them or translated into an English translation, in a sense owned those water rights. How are we going to deal with those people?
It's a very good question, and one that the Land and Water Forum has been grappling with over the last 6 months. Now, the fourth report of the Land and Water Forum was released last Friday in Wellington, and it made a series of recommendations to government to create a framework working through councils about how to engage with that particular issue. Now, we're waiting to see how government reacts to that. The expectation is that ahead of Waitangi next year, that there will be a discussion document released by government that will canvass some options. They may not be explicit on this point. They may choose to spend more time working with iwi leaders and to iwi, but we're expecting a little bit more clarity as to how we deal with those issues coming through government now early next year. And that's another reason why we don't want to rush too fast into setting up approaches, because this is a fluid area at the moment, and that is a particularly thorny question that you ask.
Yeah, and the reason I ask that is because I know there's not many, but there are.
Come on, I can just ask the questions. I think we'll
yeah, okay. So the question is then, so we will be analysing the government's statements, and then we will be talking directly to those people who would be affected by such claims as Y2358. Is that what you're saying?
And the direct engagement with mana whenua will be through the context of the framework that we have now. I think broader questions raised by Y2358 and Schedule 2 of the treaty are ones I think probably more for this governance body to deal with separately.
So as we come back.
Oh, well, we'll leave Y2358 to the council then.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Casey.
For as long as I've been on Auckland City Council and Auckland Council, I've been on the case of water care to clean up the Meola catchment, and I'm resigned to the fact that until and if and when the central interceptor is actually operational, which is now, every time they come, there's another year added onto it, that there is absolutely there's no potential for real change in the freshwater catchments in Meola until that happens. So I'm just a wee bit worried about public expectations in that catchment area. If you're going out, I'm not sure how your E in the report relates to anything up there, but this E here says that you're going to increase the focus on whatever front end engagement is, and that includes with communities. So if you go into the communities in the Meola catchment to talk about the state of our waterways, how can you then time that any earlier than the central interceptor working? Sorry, it was a long question, but you got it.
No, through the chair, absolutely, Councillor Casey, we get that, and that's probably one of the thorniest issues, and it's that setting expectations and understanding, because as Andrew talked about at the beginning, a lot of these things are around the asset management, around the hard structures that are put in urban areas, and those asset management programs are already put in place, central interceptor being one of them. So it's about how do we work with the communities to get them engaged in that process, and understanding that this is a time frame process. So while we will be looking at putting limits into plans by 2025 as required, we then also have to look at time frames for those limits to be met, because in urban areas that's going to be a significant issue. Did you want to elaborate on that, Andrew?
Yeah, I guess if you take an example of somewhere like, say, if you look at Greater Wellington, They've got similar issues with their harbours and dealing with wastewater overflows and so on. They're slightly ahead of us in terms of responding to the NPS just because of where they were in their planning cycle. When it came out, what they're looking at the moment, from we're keeping in touch with what other people around the country are doing. What they're looking at is saying, okay, when you're dealing with wastewater overflows and the relationship between a stormwater network and wastewater, you need to look at cycles of asset investment and renewal, and that will be the backbone of your response to lifting water quality. And there will need to be a lot of engagement with the community around the timeframes that can be, that they can reasonably expect for getting outcomes. And that's one of the reasons why we say, rather than preempting and saying across the board, we should promise a fully collaborative approach. What we should do is promise a fully collaborative approach for working together to understand what's going on, and then we're going to need to work through you to get advice about how we take that through into a statutory planning framework that commits us to investment and so on, and particular rules. So we will need to have a lot of dialogue around that, and but we will be able to lean on the experiences from other regions around the country about how we manage those expectations around timeframes. And Watercare is actively engaged with us and working on this issue, as well as at the national level through the Land and Water Forum. And the framework that we're expecting to be implemented a little bit more over the next little while does give some signals about how it will take a long time to turn around some of these urban water management issues.
So just to be clear, when you start your community engagement, is that staged as well? Because I know that you're staging your plan, but is the community engagement starting, regardless of which area it is?
So the first thing that we're going to do over the next little while is basically get our own affairs in order. So there's, in any particular catchment in Auckland or grouping of catchments, various different parts of the council family will be active in doing things that affect water. So what we're doing through this program is bringing them all together, making sure that we all understand where we're at, what investments are committed, who's doing what, how they're engaging, and then we can step that out to work more with the community once we have a really good base of information, and we also have a monitoring and evaluation framework set up so that we can share information effectively. So the short answer is yes, it's staged, and we're going to be coming back to you for advice at those key decision points where we need to take that engagement then through into actually plan making and those kinds of decisions, investment decisions and so on.
Thank you. Mr Taipari?
Oh, kia ora, Mr Chairman. I've been proposing to put some amendments up, Mr Chairman, but I think they've been answered. So you confirmed that there is a requirement for an annual report?
Yes, there is.
Okay. And you have spoken a lot about the engagement with mana whenua, and you've made reference to the Kaitiaki mana whenua forum. That's a water care forum. Has council adopted that forum generally?
Well, through the chair, again, it's about us utilising those existing networks that are already there from a water care. So water care's in that, water care's in us, with us, it's part of the council family. So instead of setting up new structures, what we've done is identified where we can get some understanding of the broader interests to make sure that we're on the right track, so we can go out to and work with mana whenua.
Okay, so through you, Mr Chairman, I understood that it was specifically set up for water care and mana whenua had agreed to that. Are you saying that all the mana whenua have agreed to this forum being utilised for this purpose?
No, I wouldn't, because I think the Kaitiaki forum's only about 13 of the 19.
Yeah.
What I would say, if I may, Mr Chair, in addition to that, is what we're planning to do, particularly in this initiation phase or getting started, is, as Greg says, use as much as we can existing networks and go there asking questions. You know, how much can we get from this? Will this be fit for purpose? What gaps are there? What else do we need to do? And then bring that back again, like today, getting advice from yourself about how this is working. And we've got a program of consistent review. So early it's in mid-February next year, we're going to review what we've done, take those lessons, and then say, getting advice from Te Waka Angamua, for instance, and yourselves. What else do we need to do to make this work? And then we can institute those changes.
Okay, I'm a strong supporter, obviously, of the engagement and being inclusive. I'm just a little bit scared that there may be people misled in thinking that the Kaitiaki Forum will be a model that's been adopted or utilised by council, and yet I get a feeling that there will be people outside of that and people even in it who choose another alternative method of engagement. And so I just wanted to be clear through my questioning, Mr. Chairman, that it shouldn't be deemed as a fait accompli, that that's the vehicle that's going to get it through. The other thing that, one other question, Mr. Chairman, it relates to 19B, the Māori Impact Statement. Is the interests of mana whenua are represented in the program's cross-council managerial steering group by Te Waka Angamua? Te Waka Angamua represents Auckland Council, not mana whenua. Yeah. Is that a error, that statement in the Māori Impact Statement, or is that what you think it is?
No, so through the chair, we've taken that from the national precedents. So essentially what we're saying is Te Waka Angamua helps us represent interests. They do not represent each of the mana whenua. So we use the example of the iwi Leaders Forum that was set up within the Land and Water Forum, whereas they can help us understand the tikanga, understand where we're going in the right direction, but it does not supplant the decision making that needs to happen at the hapu and the rohu level, at the marae level. But it just helps us give a bit of a steer, but then we go out and make sure that and so that's why we're not putting anything rigid in place. We haven't got any clear structured frameworks because we don't want to do that without mana whenua.
Okay, so based on that answer, that's an error in wording to say the interests of mana whenua are represented. Programs cross via Te Waka Angamua.
I think
Just said.
the intent of what we're saying here, and the words might not be quite right. They might be able to be misconstrued, so we can have a look at that. But the intent of what we're doing here is, like if we go back to those three tiers that the program is operating at, the governance and strategy, operational kind of decision making, but then in the powerhouse is that engagement at the flax roots level. If we are looking at the iwi technical advisors as they contributed into the Land and Water Forum, and we're also looking at a role like say that Te Puni Kokiri plays in government processes. For the context of what we're doing as a council, what we need before we engage with iwi asking strategic or governance questions, and before we engage on the ground, we need advice from people, and it could be from Te Waka Angamua or through Te Waka Angamua, getting technical advice in to help us make sure that we're kind of there or thereabouts and understanding what mana whenua are saying would or wouldn't work for them generally. So it's basically helping us make sure that we've got a handle on where mana whenua are coming from before we engage, as opposed to seeking representation.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Well, I hear all those answers, but let me say this, Mr. Chairman, the word represented isn't correct to say that.
Well, okay, he said he'll change that.
No, it's okay, I'm just familiar.
He'll change it, will he?
That's no trouble through the chair, yes, absolutely. Reword that.
Thank you. And Councillor Cooper.
I'm all right, I've had the questions answered.
Councillor Lee.
Yeah, just a comment really. I'm just...
Oh, we've got questions at the moment. Thank you. Councillor Cashmere, you got a question?
Yes, I do indeed, Mr. Chairman. So in the urban context as compared to the rural context, so Auckland's a very large rural area as well as the urban area. So in the urban context, we've got a lot of polluted waterways, we've